Before we dive into today's intense story, a quick reminder. Over 90% of our viewers watch our videos but aren't subscribed. If you enjoy content like this, take a second to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. And if you find this story gripping, don't forget to like the video. It really helps us out. My name is Clara and I've been married to my husband, Daniel, for over 14 years. We met in college. One of those stories people tell at reunions and smile fondly about. He was charming back then, quick-witted, ambitious, and always so sure of where he was going. I was the quieter one, focused, soft-spoken, drawn to stability. We balanced each other in ways that made sense at the time. We got married young, maybe too young. I was just 23, Daniel 25. Our early years were filled with rented apartments, student loans, ramen dinners, and arguments over whose turn it was to do dishes. But we loved each other through it all. At least I thought we did. By the time we hit our mid-30s, things had changed. Daniel had built a successful career in finance and I'd stepped away from mine to raise our two kids, Leia and James. I was fine with that decision at first. I told myself being home for the kids was noble, that being the constant presence in their lives would be worth more than any paycheck. But slowly, without realizing it, I started losing pieces of myself. The days began to blur into one another. Early mornings, packed lunches, school drop-offs, grocery lists, meal preps, late nights. Somewhere between Daniel's business trips and board meetings, we stopped talking about anything that mattered. Conversations turned into updates. Hugs turned into routines. Intimacy faded, replaced by the logistics of family life. I didn't blame him entirely. We both let the distance grow. But what hurt the most was how unnoticed I felt. Then last spring, everything began to shift. That was when Aiden moved back next door. He'd grown up 2 houses down, the only child of the Lees who'd been our neighbors for decades. I remembered Aiden as a bright, energetic kid, always kicking a soccer ball or biking with a pack of other boys. When he turned 18, he left for college in California. And for years, we rarely heard about him. But after his mother passed away, he came back, now 23, freshly graduated, and looking after his father who wasn't doing well health-wise. The first time I saw him again, he was unloading boxes from a U-Haul. I was trimming the hedges out front, and for a second I didn't recognize him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and had that easy confidence people often carry in their 20s. He smiled when he saw me. "Mrs. Owens," he asked. I laughed. "You're not allowed to call me that. It makes me sound ancient." He grinned. "Sorry, Clara." Then that was how it started. Just a smile, a name, a reintroduction. In the weeks that followed, I'd see him often. He'd mow the lawn for his dad, walk their dog, sometimes sit on the porch, reading or talking on the phone. We exchanged the usual pleasantries neighbors do, weather, news, a shared complaint about garbage pickup delays. Nothing unusual. But it was around midsummer that our conversation started to grow longer. One afternoon, I was struggling with a broken sprinkler head in the backyard. Daniel was away as usual, and I didn't want to call a plumber for something so minor. Aiden noticed from his porch and came over. "Need help?" he offered. I hesitated, then nodded. "It's embarrassing. I've been wrestling with this thing for 20 minutes. He crouched down beside me and started fiddling with the pipe. I watched him work, focused, patient, even a little amused by my frustration. Within minutes, the sprinkler sputtered back to life. "There," he said, brushing dirt off his hands. "Not so hard." "Easy for you to say," I laughed. From that moment, something changed. It wasn't dramatic or obvious, but I could feel it. A subtle shift in the air whenever he was around. He'd wave when he saw me gardening, linger a little longer during our chats, ask me how I was doing, not just in passing, but with genuine interest, and I found myself responding, not just out of politeness, but out of something else. Something I wasn't ready to name. I began looking forward to seeing him. When I baked, I'd bring over extra for him and his dad. When I went out for a walk, I'd glance toward their porch to see if he was out. It wasn't romantic. Not yet. At least I told myself it wasn't. It was attention, kindness, someone noticing me for more than just what I did for others. Then one afternoon in late August, something happened that tipped the scale. It was a hot day and the kids were at a friend's house. I was sitting on the porch drinking iced tea and reading when Aiden walked over with a folder in his hand. "Hey," he said. "Mind if I pick your brain about something?" He explained he was applying to graduate schools and wanted feedback on his personal statement. I was flattered. He remembered I used to teach English before I quit to stay home. We sat there for over an hour discussing his essay goals, dreams. He listened intently, asked questions, made me feel relevant again. After a while, he leaned back and said, "You should be doing this still, Clara. Teaching, I mean. You're too smart to not be out there." I looked at him caught off guard. It's been years. I wouldn't even know where to begin. "Well, you'd be great. That's obvious." It wasn't the words. It was the way he said them. Earnest, unfiltered, like he saw something in me I had long forgotten. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing his voice, remembering the way he looked at me, not with pity, not with politeness, but with genuine admiration. It stirred something in me I buried for a long time. Over the next few weeks, we saw more of each other. He'd stop by with his dog, ask about my garden, bring me a new book he thought I'd like. There was always a reason, always an excuse. But I think we both knew the truth. We never crossed any lines. Not physically, but the emotional lines. Those blurred faster than I was prepared for. One evening as we sat in my backyard watching the sunset, he said quietly, "You seem lonely sometimes." I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to deny it, to pretend I was fine, but I couldn't. Not with him. Sometimes, I admitted. He nodded, then looked at me with a mix of sadness and understanding. You deserve more than just being someone's background character, Clara. That sentence stayed with me. It echoed through my mind when I cooked dinner, when I folded clothes, when I sat alone in the quiet house after the kids went to bed. I started questioning everything. Was this the life I had chosen or the life I had settled for? Daniel noticed the shift, but barely. He was too wrapped up in work and meetings and his endless parade of emails and deadlines. He'd ask if everything was okay, but only in passing. I told him I was tired. He'd nod and return to his phone. Aiden, on the other hand, listened. He made me feel visible, important. I didn't know what I was doing. Not really. I wasn't planning anything. I wasn't plotting to leave or betray or destroy. I was just lost. And he made me feel found. But even in the quiet joy of our connection, I knew I was walking a tightrope. One misstep and everything could fall apart. I told myself it was harmless, just friendship, just someone who made me feel alive again. But deep down, I think I knew this wasn't going to stay innocent forever. The days that followed were filled with a quiet kind of confusion. I found myself constantly weighing what I was doing, how it looked, what it meant. I hadn't done anything technically wrong, at least not in the conventional sense. But something inside me knew I was edging closer to a line I might not be able to walk back from. I started seeing less of Aiden, intentionally pulling away, creating space. I told myself it was for the best. I needed to redirect my focus on Daniel, on the kids, on the life I built. I thought if I put my energy back into the routine, back into my marriage, the feelings I had would fade like fog lifting in the sun. But emotions don't just disappear on command. And space, I learned, doesn't always erase connection. Sometimes magnifies it. Aiden didn't push. He was respectful, distant, polite. But I could tell he noticed the change. His waves were shorter, his smile smaller, and though he stopped by less often when our eyes met across the fence or from our respective porches, there was a quiet understanding hanging between us. We both felt the absence. At home, things continued as usual on the surface. Daniel was still working long hours, always tired, always distracted. He'd started sleeping in the guest room some nights, claiming it was for back pain or to get better sleep. I didn't argue. We'd grown used to the distance. It had crept in so slowly over the years it almost felt normal. But it wasn't. Not really. The kids, thankfully, remained blissfully unaware. They were still young enough to be absorbed in their own little worlds of homework and weekend plans. I kept up appearances, packed their lunches, helped with school projects, cheered from the sidelines at Leia's soccer games and James' piano recital. But inside, I was unraveling. One night, Daniel came home later than usual. It was almost midnight. I was sitting on the couch, half reading a book, though I hadn't turned a page in 20 minutes. He dropped his keys on the counter and sighed. Sorry, long day. I nodded. You've had a lot of those lately. He sat down across from me and rubbed his eyes. I know. It's just been nonstop. The new clients are a nightmare. We sat in silence for a few minutes. I could feel the space between us. Wide, cold, full of things unsaid. Do you ever feel like we're just roommates? I asked suddenly, my voice quieter than I intended. He looked up surprised. What I mean, like we're just coexisting, going through the motions, he frowned. Where's this coming from? I don't know, I said, though I did. I guess I just miss talking. Really talking. He sighed again, this time deeper. Clara, I'm doing my best. Work is overwhelming. The kids need us. We don't have time to sit and analyze our marriage every night. I stared at him and for a moment I felt like I was looking at a stranger. I'm not asking for a seminar, Daniel. I'm asking for a conversation. He stood pacing. And what exactly do you want me to say? That I'm sorry for being tired? That I should quit my job and sit on the porch with you all day? That stung. Not because it was cruel, but because it was dismissive. I wasn't asking for everything. I was asking for something. No, I replied softly. I just want to feel like you see me. His expression faltered for a split second, somewhere between guilt and defensiveness, but instead of responding, he walked out of the room. That night, I stared at the ceiling long after the house had gone quiet. My mind kept going back to Aiden, to the way he'd listen, really listen, when I spoke, how he never made me feel like I was asking too much. The next day, I went about things as usual, errands, cleaning, prepping dinner. But in the late afternoon, I found myself outside again, trimming the bushes near the fence that bordered our yards. It wasn't intentional. At least that's what I told myself. But when I saw Aiden sitting on his porch, headphones in, sketching in a notebook, my heart gave a small jolt. I hesitated, then waved. He looked up, smiled, and pulled off his headphones. Hey, stranger. I smiled back. Hi. He walked over, stopping a few feet from where I stood. You've been scarce. I know, I said, brushing my hair behind my ear. Just needed to clear my head. He nodded slowly. Did it help? I'm not sure. There was a long pause, not uncomfortable, but filled with unspoken things. Do you want to take a walk? He asked suddenly. Just around the block. Nothing serious. I hesitated, then nodded. Okay. We walked in silence at first, the autumn air crisp and the sky painted with early evening hues. Leaves crunched under our feet and the world felt still, quiet in a way that made it easier to think. You're not crazy, you know, he said eventually. I looked at him. For what? For feeling invisible, for wanting something more than just going through the motions. I exhaled, my breath visible in the cool air. Sometimes I feel like I'm standing in the middle of my life, and no one sees me. He stopped walking, turning to face me. I see you. The words hung in the air between us. Simple, honest, dangerous. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat tightened and my eyes burned. I turned my head away, trying to hide the emotion that bubbled up unexpectedly. He didn't push. Just stood there beside me quietly, offering something I hadn't felt in years. Presence. That night I sat on the edge of my bed and cried. Not because I had done something wrong, but because I knew where my heart was drifting, and I didn't know how to stop it. The following weeks were filled with tension. I tried to avoid Aiden again, but this time it felt impossible. Our connection was no longer vague or uncertain. It was real, and trying to bury it only made it stronger. He never said anything inappropriate, never touched me. But everything about us felt like a fragile thread stretched tight, waiting to snap. One afternoon he left a book on my porch, a novel we had talked about during one of our earlier conversations. There was a note inside. For when the world gets too loud, you deserve quiet. I sat there with the book in my lap, staring at his handwriting, feeling like the walls I had built around myself were crumbling faster than I could repair them. I started writing in a journal again, something I hadn't done since college. I poured everything onto those pages. My confusion, my guilt, my longing, my fear. I wrote about the life I thought I wanted and the woman I had become. And through it all, one truth kept surfacing. I was emotionally entangled with someone who wasn't my husband. I hadn't physically cheated, but in every other way that mattered, I had stepped outside the boundaries of my marriage. One night, Daniel and I had dinner in near silence. The kids were at their grandparents' for the weekend, and it should have been a rare opportunity to reconnect. Instead, we ate in two separate worlds. The clink of silverware the only sound between us. Afterward, I cleared the dishes and stood at the sink, staring out the window at the street. That's when I saw Aiden walking his dog under the street lights. He looked up toward the house. Our eyes met, and in that instant I felt everything. The possibility, the guilt, the ache of a life that might never be mine. I turned away quickly, heart pounding, and gripped the counter until my knuckles turned white. I had to make a choice. Whatever happened next couldn't be accidental. It would be deliberate. And I needed to decide who I was going to be. I went upstairs and sat across from Daniel in the bedroom. He was scrolling through emails on his phone. I think we need to talk, I said. He looked up tired. About what? About us? About everything. He hesitated, then set his phone down. Okay. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words didn't come right away. There was too much time, too much silence, too much of everything that had built up between us. I don't feel like I'm living, I finally said. I feel like I'm surviving, going through the motions, and I don't think I can do it anymore. He looked at me uncertain. Are you saying you want to leave? I don't know, I said honestly. I'm saying something has to change. He sat back, breathing out slowly. You're not happy. No, I admitted. And I don't think you are either. The conversation didn't end in a fight. There were no accusations, no slammed doors, just two people staring at the space between them, finally acknowledging it existed. I didn't mention Aiden. Not yet. That would come later. Right now, I needed to understand myself before I tried to explain it to anyone else. But I knew something for sure. This story, whatever it was becoming, wasn't over. Not yet. The days that followed were filled with reflection. I distanced myself from both Daniel and Aiden. Not out of anger, but necessity. I needed clarity. I spent more time alone, walking in the early mornings, sitting in quiet corners of the library, writing in my journal. For the first time in years, I faced myself honestly. I admitted that I had been lonely, that I had let the silence in my marriage hollow me out. And I also admitted that Aiden had become a mirror, showing me what I was missing, but not the answer to everything. One quiet afternoon, I knocked on Aiden's door. He looked surprised but didn't say a word as I handed him a folded letter. Please read it later, I said gently. I need space to rebuild myself, not through anyone else but on my own. Then I walked away. Later that evening, Daniel and I sat at the kitchen table. I told him the truth. Not all the details, but enough. He listened. For once, truly listened. And for the first time in a long time, we talked not as strangers, but as two people deciding what kind of future, if any, they could rebuild together. I didn't choose Aiden. I chose healing. And in that, I finally found myself again.